Welcome to Midnight Hotels, where true stories are stranger than fiction. Turn off the lights, and now let's begin. Tonight, I will be sharing three true stories from travelers whose routine journeys turned into encounters they could never explain. Some places hide secrets that have never been explained. They look quiet and forgotten, but the people who have been there know something isn't quite right. Three stories from travelers who visited those places and came back with experiences they still can't explain. Our first story comes from Rohan Sharma, who shared a strange experience that happened to his grandfather more than 50 years ago. Now let's hear what happened in Sharma's own words. My name is Rohan. This happened to my grandfather more than 50 years ago, when he was a young man. He only told me this story once. It was a few months before he passed away. We were sitting outside after dinner, watching the rain fall across the fields. Out of nowhere, he looked at me and said, Rohan, if someone ever helps you when they don't have to, never forget it. I smiled and nodded. I thought he was simply giving me life advice. Then he looked back at the rain and quietly said, One night, someone helped me get home, but by the time I reached the village, I found out he had already died. I stared at him, not knowing what to say. He stayed quiet for a few seconds before taking a deep breath. Then he said, Let me tell you what happened. From that moment on, he told me the story in his own words. Back then, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I walked the same road almost every Friday. Our village was small, surrounded by farmers and open fields. The nearest town was about 9 miles away, and every Friday I walked there to sell vegetables from my farm and buy supplies for the week. I knew that road better than anyone. I knew where the old bridge crossed the creek. I knew the large banyan tree that stood beside the fields. I knew every bend in the road. Even if someone woke me in the middle of the night, I could have found my way home without thinking. Or at least, that's what I believed. But that Friday started like every other Friday. The market was crowded. People were buying fresh vegetables, drinking hot tea, and catching up with friends they didn't see all week. On my side, I sold everything I had brought with me and bought some flour, sugar, cooking oil, and few other things before getting ready to leave. Just as I picked up my bag, I heard someone call my name, Harish. I turned around and smiled and gave him a big hug. It was Shankar. We had known each other for years. He wasn't just my neighbor, he was one of my closest friends. A few years earlier, Shankar had been going through a difficult time. His daughter was getting married, but he didn't have enough money for the wedding. I lent him the money without asking for anything in return. He never forgot that kindness, so every time we met, he thanked me again and again. Harish, he said with a smile, you're always in a hurry. I laughed. My wife will start worrying if I'm home late. He nodded. Fair enough. How is your daughter? I asked. She's doing well, he said. She's happy. I'm glad to hear that. And the farm? He smiled. Much better this year. We finally had enough rain. We talked for another 20 or 30 minutes. Nothing unusual. Just two old friends catching up after a busy week. Then I looked toward the sky. Dark clouds had covered the sun. I should go now, I said. Shankar looked up. That storm is moving in fast. I will be all right. You know this road better than anyone. I smiled. I will see you again soon. He smiled back. I hope so. We shook hands. I picked my bag and started the long walk home. For the first hours, everything was peaceful. The road was empty. A cool breeze moved across the field. The only sound was birds singing somewhere in the distance. Then the first raindrop landed on my shoulder. I looked up. Within minutes, the rain became so heavy that I couldn't barely see the road ahead of me. The dirt path turned into thick mud. Water rushed through the field on both sides. The wind grew stronger this time with every step. I pulled my coat tighter and I kept walking ahead. I told myself I just need to reach the old banyan tree. Once I see it, I will know exactly where I am. Then lightning flashed across the sky. For just a second, I saw the tree, and then I stopped. Something wasn't right this time. The banyan tree should have been on my left, and instead, it was on the right. I slowly turned in circle. Nothing looked familiar anymore. The rain had washed away the wagon tracks. The field all looked the same. The road had disappeared. For the first time in my life, I realized I was lost. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small oil lantern I always carried with me. After several tries, I managed to light it. The flame burned for only a few seconds before a strong gust of wind blew it out. I tried another match. It was soaked. Then another one. Nothing is working. I stood there in a complete darkness. The only thing I could hear was the rain. I took a deep breath and called out, "Hello?" No answer. I tried again. "Can anybody hear me?" For a few long seconds, there was nothing. Then something happened. From somewhere behind me, a calm voice said, "Harish!" Every hair on my arm stood up. I knew that voice. I just couldn't remember why. Slowly, a warm orange light appeared through the rain. It moved close until it stopped several feet behind me. It was an old oil lantern, but the person holding it remained hidden in the darkness. "I think I have lost the road," I said. "You have," the voice replied. "Can you help me get back to the village?" There was a short pause. Yes. Relief washed over me. I started turning around, but before I could even turn, the voice spoke again. "Do not look back." I froze. "But I'm only trying to thank you." "I know, but do not look back." I was confused. "Why?" The answer came calmly. "Just keep walking ahead. I will make sure you get home safe." I don't know why, but I trusted him this time. Without any other word, I started going forward into the darkness. The lantern stayed several steps behind me. Its warm orange light was just bright enough to show the muddy road ahead. I still couldn't see the man's face. The rain continued falling, but somehow his lantern never flickered. That was weird. Not even once. Mine had gone out almost immediately. How is that even possible? It was very lit, as if there wasn't a single drop of rain. I wanted to ask him about it, and instead I kept walking. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sound were the rain, the wind, and the boots sinking into the mud. Then the voice quietly said, "Stay to your left." Without thinking, I stepped to the left. A second later, lightning flashed across the sky. A deep ditch, filled with rushing water, was only a few feet to my right. If I had taken one more step, I would have fallen straight into that deep ditch. So I stepped and took a deep breath. "Thank you," I said. The man didn't answer at all, so we kept walking and walking. A few minutes later, he spoke again. "Slow down," I did. Another flash of lightning lit up the road, and part of it had collapsed into the flooded creek. And I started looking at it in disbelief. "How did you know that was there?" I asked. But there was no answer. Only the sound of the rain. We continued walking. I looked down at the muddy ground. That's when I noticed something strange. My footprints were easy to see. Step after step, stretched behind me, but I couldn't see anyone else's. I looked again. Maybe the rain had washed them away. No. The mud around my footprints was untouched. A cold feeling ran through my body. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to see who was carrying the lantern. Instead, I remember what he had said. Do not look back. So I kept walking again. After a while, I tried talking again. You seem to know this road well. I do. Were you heading back to the village too? Yes. His answers were too short and calm. I smiled. Then I will have to thank you properly once we get there. But he didn't reply this time. The silence felt heavier and heavier than before. As we continued, I noticed something else. I could hear every step I took. The mud squished beneath my boots. The water splashed around my feet. But behind me, there was no footsteps. Not even one. I stopped. The lantern stopped too. Is something wrong? He asked. I hesitated. No, I thought I heard something. His voice remained calm. Keep walking. I nodded nervously. But somehow, I trusted him more than my own fear. The rain slowly became lighter. The wind became to settle. Then, through the darkness, I recognized something. The old village well. And then I became so relieved. We are almost home, I said. Yes. His voice sounded quieter this time. A few moments later, I saw the first houses. Lights glowed through the windows. Dogs barked somewhere inside the village. I smiled for the first time that night. I honestly didn't think I would make it. You were never alone, he replied. When we reached the edge of the village, the lantern stopped moving. My road ends here, he said. I nodded. At least let me thank you properly. You already have. I frowned. I don't understand. You will. Those were the last words he said. I wanted to turn around. Every part of me wanted to see his face, but I remembered the promise again. So simply, I bowed my head. Thank you. But there was no reply. I walked the rest of the way into the village alone. As I reached the center of the village, I noticed something unusual. Several people were gathered outside. Some held lanterns, others stood quietly with their heads lowered. The moment they saw me, one of my neighbors hurried over. Harish, where have you been? We have been looking for you. I got lost in the storm, I said. But someone found me. Who? Shankar? He walked behind me with a lantern and brought me all the way back. Nobody said a word. They simply looked at me in surprise. Finally, one of the older men spoke. Harish, what did you just say? I said Shankar helped me. He saved my life. The old man's face turned pale. He slowly shook his head. That's impossible. I frowned. What do you mean? He took a deep breath before answering. Shankar died before sunset. After he said that, I felt my heart sink. No, that's not possible. I was talking to him. We spoke at the market. He walked me home. The old man looked at the others, then back at me. We brought his body home hours ago. I couldn't speak. Every moment from that walk rushed back into my mind. The lantern that never flickered, the missing footprints, the silence, the voice that sounded so familiar, but I don't know who exactly was. Then I finally understood why he had to told me not to look back. If I had, maybe I would have seen something I was never meant to see. Or maybe I would have realized much sooner that the man walked behind me was no longer alive. Grandpa stopped speaking. For a long time, neither of us said a word. The rain was still falling outside. Finally, I asked him, "Do you really believe it was Shankar?" He looked out across the field and smiled. "I don't know how to explain what happened, but I know one thing. Some people never forget a kindness, not even after they are gone." Grandpa never spoke about that night again, but every time I trained, he would quietly look toward the old road before closing the front door, and whenever someone thanked him for helping them, he would simply smile, as if he remembered a friend who had once kept a promise long after death. My friend John and I went hiking in the mountains for the weekend. Neither of us had been there before, but the trail was popular and we were not worried about getting lost. The weather was perfect and everything went exactly as we planned. As we reached the top of the mountain, we took some pictures, had fun, we ate lunch, and started hiking back down. But that's when we made one simple mistake. And instead of taking the same trail back, we decided to follow a different path that looked like a shortcut. About 30 minutes later, we realized we had no idea where we are. Our phone had no signals, the trail makers had disappeared, every direction looked the same exactly. As we stood there trying to decide which way to go, we noticed someone walking further down the trail. He was alone, and beside him were two golden retrievers. We started walking faster, hoping to catch up with him. "Excuse me," I called. The man stopped and waited for us. He looked to be in his early 30s. He had a backpack over one shoulder, hiking boots, and climbing gears hanging from his side of his bag. The two golden retrievers stood quietly beside him. Both dogs wagged their tails as we walked closer. "Sorry," I said, trying to catch my breath. "We are a little lost." He smiled. "Wrong trail?" I laughed. "That's obvious?" He nodded. "It happens more often than you think." I showed him the map on my phone. "We are trying to get back to the parking area." He looked at the screen for a moment before pointing further down the trail. "You are heading the wrong way." My stomach sank. How far off we are? "About 7 miles." John looked at me and sighed. "Ah, great." The man smiled. "Don't worry. If you keep following this trail, you will reach a small mountain town in about 4 miles. He pointed further ahead. "My car is parked there. If you are still walking, when I get there, I will drive you the rest of the way." I couldn't believe our luck. "Seriously?" He nodded. "No problem. Thank you," I said. "You have probably saved us a few hours." He smiled. "I have been lost before. I know how it feels." The three of us continued walking together. The dogs stayed close to him, occasionally running ahead before coming back. They were friendly. One of them even walked beside me for a while before running back to its owner. For the next 15 minutes, we talked about hiking, camping, and mountains. He was easy to talk to, calm, friendly, the kind of person you immediately trusted. He told us he hiked these trails almost every week. I remember thinking, if anyone knows these mountains, it's him. Eventually, we started getting tired. He'd walked a little faster than we did. "Go ahead," I called. "We will catch up." He smiled and gave me a small wave. Then he continued down the trail with the two dogs following behind him. A minute later, he disappeared around the bend in the trail. John and I kept walking at our own pace. The trail wasn't that difficult. We expected to catch up with him within a minute or two. When we reached the bend, we stopped. The trail ahead was completely empty. I looked at John. "Where did he go?" He shrugged. "I don't know." We looked further down the trail. It stretched straight ahead for a quiet distance. There were no side paths, no large rocks, no place where someone could hide. More importantly, there were no dogs. Two golden retrievers couldn't just disappear without making a sound. We hurried down the trail, expecting to find him around the next turn, but nothing, we couldn't find him. We called out, "Hello!" No answer, not even barking. The mountains had become strangely quiet. John laughed nervously. Maybe he walked really fast. I smiled. With two dogs, neither of us believed it. Still, we kept following the direction he had given us. About an hour later, the trees began to thin out. In the distance, we saw a few small buildings, then a road. We had reached the little mountain town exactly where the man said it would be. I couldn't believe it. He was right, I said. John nodded. Every direction he gave us was perfect. We looked around, hoping to find him or his car. There was only a few vehicles parked near a small cafe. No sign of the man, no sign of the dogs. We waited for almost 20 minutes. He never appeared. Eventually, a local shop owner asked if we needed help. I described the man, tall, friendly, two golden retrievers, climbing gear. The owner listened carefully before shaking his head. I have never seen anyone like that around here. I pointed toward the trail. He was just there. He even told us he would give us a ride. The owner looked toward the mountains, then back at us. You are not the first hikers to tell a strange story about these trails. Before I could ask what he meant, he simply smiled and went back inside. John and I looked at each other. Neither of us said a word. And we found another ride back to our car and drove home. For weeks, we tried to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe he had taken another trail we didn't notice. Maybe we somehow walked past him, or there was a path hidden by the trees. But no explanation ever made sense to this day. The part that stays with me isn't that he disappeared. It is that everything he told us was true. He led us to safety. Then he was simply gone. Even now, whenever I see someone hiking with two golden retrievers, I always look twice, just in case. My name is Omar. I have been camping in the desert for years. I have been in the same area more times than I can count. I knew every road, every landmark. I had never gotten lost before. That's why what happened that night still doesn't make any sense. About a year ago, 11 of my friends and I planned a camping trip deep in the desert. We arrived just before the sunset. The weather was perfect. We drove over the sand dunes for a while, climbed a nearly hill to watch the sunset, then headed back to camp. The rest of the evening was exactly what you would expect. We started a fire, cooked dinner, talked for hours, played cards, laughed, and joked. Before we even realizing, it was almost 2 in the morning. I looked up and noticed something. There wasn't a moon. The desert was darker than I would ever seen it. I smiled and said, "Everyone, turn off your lights." They looked at me confused. Trust me, one by one every light went out. For a few seconds we couldn't see anything. Then our eyes slowly adjusted above us. The sky was filled with thousands and thousands of stars. Nobody spoke. It was so fascinating. We just sat there looking up. The desert was completely silent. Then, for all of a sudden, a woman screamed loud and desperate. The sound echoed across the desert. It came from top of the same hill we had climbed before the sunset. It wasn't a quick scream. It lasted for several long seconds. Loud, desperate. Close enough that every one of us heard it. The campfire was the only thing moving. Everyone else sat frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. We just looked at each other, waiting to hear it again. Then one of my friends laughed nervously. Did everyone hear that? Every single of us nodded. Another friend pointed toward the hill. Maybe someone needs help. For a moment, we considered driving over to check. Then we looked at the hill. It was completely dark. There wasn't a single light anywhere. No flashlight, no campfire, nothing at all. 5 of us decided to walk toward it. The others stayed behind at the campsite. One of them turned one of the lights back on before we left. "Don't take too long," he called. We laughed. "We will be back in a few minutes." We grabbed our flashlight and started walking. The hill wasn't very far. I walked there many times before. About 5 minutes later, we reached a small sand dune. That's when one of my friends stopped. "Look!" At the top of the dunes was the shadow of what looked like a cat. It wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, watching us. I aimed my flashlight toward it. The moment the light reached the top, but there was nothing there. No cat, no footprints, nothing. We all looked at each other. Nobody wanted to admit it, but every one of us felt uneasy. "Let's head back," someone said. No one argued. We turned around and started walking toward the campsite. Or at least we thought we were. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The campsite should have been right in front of us. It wasn't even that far. Instead, there was only darkness. I stopped walking. "This isn't possible. We have been walking in a straight line." One of my friends pulled out his phone. No signal. The others checked theirs. Same thing. I looked back toward the hill. It was still there, exactly where it had been. But somehow the campsite had disappeared. We kept walking. 5 more minutes passed. Then another 5. Then, finally, one of my friends grabbed my arm. "Omar, do not move." I looked toward the top of the hill. Something was standing there. At first, I thought it was a person. Then it slowly stood taller, much taller than usual. Its arm hung almost to the ground. Its shoulders looked far too wide. And where its head should have been, there was only a small dark shape. None of us spoke, and none of us moved. Every flashlight pointed toward it, and none of them were strong enough to clearly show what we were looking at. Then it moved, not toward us, across the top of the hill. For a few seconds, it ran on all fours, almost like a large animal. Then it disappeared behind the rocks. "Run!" someone shouted. None of us waited. We turned around and ran as fast as we could. A few minutes later, we finally saw the lights from our campsite. I have never been so relieved in my life. The others ran toward us. "Where were you? We thought you got lost." I was still trying to catch my breath. "What do you mean?" "We have been trying to call you all day." "There was no signal," I said. Before anyone could answer, one of my friends pointed toward the hill again. There! We all turned. The same dark figure was standing at the top. This time, everyone saw it. It stayed there for only a few seconds, then it slowly crouched down, as if it didn't want us to see it. A moment later, something small ran across the top of the hill. It looked almost like a cat. Then it vanished into the darkness. That was enough for all of us. The plan had been to leave after sunrise. Instead, we started packing immediately, and nobody wanted to spend another minute there. I inflated the tires while everyone else loaded the cars. We left just after 3 in the morning. I drove the first vehicle because I knew the way back. There was one mountain I always used as a landmark. Once I passed it, I knew the main road was only a few minutes away. I drove past it. A few minutes later, I saw the same mountain again. I frowned. That's strange. I kept driving. Then I passed it again and again. By the sixth time, I knew something was terribly wrong. I stopped the car. Every direction looked unfamiliar this time. The other two vehicles pulled in behind us. My brother got out and walked over. What's going on? We are driving in circles, I said. He looked around. We have never been here before. We switched drivers, hoping a fresh set of eyes would help, but it didn't at all. After 15 minutes later, we stopped again. Mountains surrounded us on every side. None of us understood how we had ended up there. It was almost time for prayer. One of my friends quietly said, "Let's pray." We stood together in silence of the desert. As I finished the final verse, we all said, "Amen." But it wasn't only our voices. There were more voices than people, clear and very close, right behind us. When the prayer ended, nobody spoke. I looked at every face. They had all heard it too. We got back into the cars without saying a word. As the sky slowly became brighter, something impossible happened. The mountains around us were gone. The open desert stretched out in every direction, and just ahead was the road we had been searching for all night. We drove home in a complete silence. When I finally pulled into my driveway, my father rushed outside. The look on his face caught me off guard. "Where have you been?" he asked. "Camping," I said. "We just got back." He looked at me. "Omar, you have been gone for 2 days." I laughed out of fear. "No way, that's impossible." "We left yesterday afternoon." He slowly shook his head. "You left the day before yesterday." So I checked my phone. He was totally right. Somehow, the 12 of us had lost an entire day. To this day, none of us can explain what happened in that desert. We all heard the scream. We all saw the figure. We all heard the extra voices during the prayer. And every one of us came home 24 hours later than we should have. I have gone camping many times since then, but I have never gone back to that place, and I never will.